You want to sit in the middle there?
Yeah.
Steph, sit in the middle.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. A rose between two thorns. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Freedom Thinking Community Group. And thank you for joining us. It's a small group again.
We have 3 in the room, plus us 3.
Yep.
And
3 in the room.
3 in the room.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
2 dogs.
7.
But the energy.
So, yeah, out of the 8, 2 dogs. So it's a quarter of the population in this room is dog. But it's good. We've got the people who should be here.
There you go.
And as we were driving down, it was a beautiful moonlit full moon. Stunning full moon, wasn't it? So yeah, let's feel that. Just want to say, yeah, we've got a special guest come to speak with us. And Dave's got an awesome background. He comes at this from a really beautiful angle. And I don't want to take too much away from Dave. I want to give Dave a chance to speak and share about himself and what he's doing, and then we're just going to open this up for like conversations as we usually do. We want this to be interactive, and people, please share your insights. Please share. If you've got questions, please share your questions. So without further ado, all the way from Bonnie, Scotland.
Wow.
But yeah, don't sound like it because I'm not originally from there. So don't get put off by the fact that I don't sound Scottish, even though I live there. Hello, everyone. Thank you for putting up with me this evening. I'm Dave Hill. I'm probably about 5 years into my 3 principles journey. But actually, that's the only 5 years of knowledge about the 3 principles and 45 years of actually being on the journey. And I came to it, that this whole understanding through helping soldiers, helping veterans. I spent 17 years in the army myself, and 8 years ago when I left, one of my soldiers from my first platoon phoned up to say, "Boss, help, I'm broken." And he was in hospital at the time. He'd just been sectioned, and he just didn't know where to turn. And I also didn't know what the hell to do about it. But I also knew it took a lot of courage for him to put his hand up and to ask for help. So I decided quite quickly to put any misconceptions I had about what I could or couldn't do to one side, and just went with it to see what showed up. And it seemed to resonate. Something clicked between us, and that all just started off with me signposting him to a bunch of military charities, back to our regiment, say, look, we're here to help generally, let me see what I can do. And more of those conversations happened over the years. 5 years ago, my world took a bit of a shift in a wobbly direction, nothing to do with my time in the army. I spent 17 years soldiering. It was nothing to do with that, and everything to do with the change in things at home. My marriage was breaking down and I didn't see it coming. It completely knocked the wind out of me. But I also had absolute faith that everything was going to be okay. I knew that, absolutely knew it. Even though I was being sick, I wasn't eating much, I wasn't sleeping at all. I just knew everything was going to be all right. I didn't know where that faith or confidence came from. I just knew it. And I trusted it. I also thought I better put my money where my mouth is and follow what I've been doing for the last 3 years, helping other people, and talk to friends, and picked a couple of close friends to say, look, I know you're not going to know the answers to my problems. I just like some time with you, please. Just have a brew, to go for a walk, to joke about stuff or talk about stuff. I don't know what I need, but just to be there would be amazing. And I also gave myself space to explore what the hell was going on with myself, because I knew we were all okay. I knew whatever the outcome was going to be, that it would be fine. I just knew it didn't feel like that right there. I didn't understand it. I just felt faith in it, I suppose, in a way. Fast forward 5 or 6 weeks of pretending to go to work because the children were off for their summer holidays, and I didn't want to be extra weird with me moping around the house looking glum. I was on the train one morning on the way into Edinburgh, and I got hit by a thought that my thoughts weren't real and I didn't have to react to them. And it completely made sense in that moment. And I just laughed at myself, which got me some funny looks on the train. But I just knew it was true. I absolutely knew it was true, that all the pain that I was feeling up until that point was generated by the thoughts that didn't have any substance. There were things that were uncomfortable that were true, and that was fine. I could deal with those. They were fact. It was the ones that had no substance, just had a grain of truth that could be a thing, but there was nothing to back that up, that my mind was running away with and making all kinds of scenarios up that weren't real. And as soon as I saw that, life changed. Within a week, I was back at work. The first day was a bit of a car crash. I didn't actually make it into the office because I got more and more anxious the closer I got to work. And I just walked straight past the front door and didn't go in. Phoned my boss and said, I'm not coming. I'll try again tomorrow. And I was walking around scratching my head all day going, what's that all about? And I realized that it was something I hadn't considered at all, but that I was worried about being further away from the children. And that made no sense at all, because that was never a problem. That wasn't a threat. It was just something weird going on in my mind. And once I'd seen it, I thought, okay, well, that's not true. You don't have to worry about that. And yeah, the journey to work got easier and life carried on. And we ended up divorced, but very happily, bizarrely. It's not something you think about in that sense, but we are divorced. The children are very happy. They spend their time split between us, and I'm probably happier and stronger now than I ever was before. But in that immediate period, it was horrendous. It was really, really unpleasant, and I didn't like it, and I wanted it to change. And the more I wanted it to change, the more visceral it felt. But thankfully, that thought on the train made a shift for me and allowed me to get back to work. At this point, I still hadn't come across the principles at all. They didn't feature in my life. But I was speaking to a friend in London who I knew was a coach. He just phoned up out of the blue and said, hi, how are things? I've not seen you for a while. And I said what had been going on for the previous couple of months. And he said, well, do you want to have a chat? So we did. And he was saying, well, that's interesting. I think you might find the 3 principles quite an interesting idea. And I read a couple of books and I watched a couple of videos and I thought, oh, wow, that's exactly what I've just experienced. But not just now, in all the other little periods in my life where I'd got caught out by what I thought was required of me, what I thought the world wanted from me, and I didn't particularly want myself. There were certain jobs that I had in the army that I was absolutely miserable doing, but everybody said, these are the jobs that you need to have to get on and do really well. And well done you for being good enough to get that job. And the sort of ego just pushes you, it gives you that nudge to get into it. One of the jobs when I was a young platoon commander, I thought, I definitely don't want that job. I never want that job. That looks horrendous. And then someone asked me, would I like to? I'd like you to do this job for me. Oh, okay. Completely foolish, because I knew way before that it wasn't something I wanted to do or that I was probably going to be suited to. Now, I learned a lot from it, absolutely learned a lot from it, but I also learned what I should probably follow. And that's the thing that felt right. As soon as I made the decision to upset my boss and say, I can't do this anymore, you're going to have to find someone else. While it caused a load of pain work-wise at that moment for him and for me, I felt brilliant because I knew I was going to be doing something that wasn't this. And that was great. So it's interesting how following, I'd always known in my heart of hearts that following what felt right was probably the right thing to do, but didn't have the faith to back that up. And that's what the principles has shown me, is that actually there's a reason why that felt right and why that's probably the way I should do things and trust it more often. And that's certainly what I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years. But in that moment of coming across the principles and going, oh, wow, there it is in my life, I can see that, that's amazing. I also saw that it was an amazing way to potentially help my friends that were struggling with post-traumatic stress, and various other things of being out in the civilian world, having been in a very different military world, because I knew some of them were really struggling, but I knew not all of them were. And therefore there was potential for those that were struggling to not be. And I saw that principles were potentially a really good way to try and help them see that. I then got very anxious about it and nervous that I was going to hurt people with something I'd read in a book, and decided to throw some money at the problem and went off and did a course. And within a couple of weeks of being on that course, went, I definitely can't hurt people with this understanding. But it did give me the confidence to step up and start doing more, and that's what I've been doing ever since. So yeah, I'm now helping veterans with all kinds of things. There've been guys with, as I said, mostly post-traumatic stress, but not solely. A few with depression, some with money issues, some with gambling addiction, some with drug and alcohol addiction, most of which caused by their desire to take the pain away from what they're struggling with. And when you explain things in a really simple, soft way that the principles do, and you take away right, we need to get into the issue, understand what your issue is and go, well, this is what being a human being is like, discussing what makes us all the same and seeing the brilliance in that collective way that we experience the world that is the same for every single one of us, but also completely unique in the way that we see things, then you just see layers falling off them of things that they've been carrying around the place because they thought that's what's required of them, or they thought that they were ill as a result of things that that have been going on in their lives, and that they don't really have any vote in that. In the last month, my regiment's just set up a new program called the Always a Rifleman program. Sorry, I should have said I was in a regiment initially called the Royal Green Jackets, which then became the Rifles. And we've always had faith in every single member of the unit. There's an idea that goes all the way back to our formation in the Napoleonic Wars of the thinking rifleman. Because of the nature of the way that we did things, everyone was spread out, and the guys needed to get on and do things on their own and trust their own initiative. So there's always been that understanding in there that you have got everything you need. You just need to have confidence to back that up, that you'll be all right. And so I've been invited into that group, along with a bunch of other people, to try and reconnect guys that are struggling. And I say guys because while the infantry has changed massively in the last 18 months, in the fact that women are now allowed to join the infantry, all the time I served, they weren't allowed. We did have ladies in the battalion, but they were doing clerical work, medical staff, or working as chefs, along with a bunch of guys as well. So that's, apologies if I talk in terms of guys. It is mainly men that I'm speaking to, purely because that's the nature of the beast that I was in. But the regiment is starting to see that we can help each other. There is a real strength in being able to connect people back to their friends, back to people that they haven't even met. And from my perspective, actually let them know that they can speak to anybody, because all human beings connect the same way. There's just a belief that we're institutionalized, that we can only relate to each other. It's a useful starting point, absolutely is a useful starting point. That's right. But it doesn't need to be that way. And we can rapidly increase the pool of support for veterans across the world, and reach out to that space. And I'm just having fun with it, just seeing where it goes. So at the moment, I'm writing a book with an RAF veteran, which is going to be called Missing in Action. It's obviously got a fairly military name to it, but the idea of being missing in action is there's hope that you can be found. And a lad that these two guys know, Neil Sylvester Sylvie, is an artist, and he's doing the cover for, or has done the cover for us already. We're being very slow on writing the book, which shows 3 soldiers on the front and four reflections in a puddle. So there's someone's missing, but there's something there. And on the reverse cover, all 4 of them are going to be reunited with their reflections. And hopefully the journey through the book will provide people with that hope to see that they're okay, that they, despite how they feel at the moment, that they are okay, and that they will see things differently. So that's quite an exciting project. Because we're being slow, mainly in terms of we're trying to get 30 or 40 different stories of people to get into the book, so that people can see hopefully 2 or 3 stories that resonate with them and go, okay, I can see something here for me. Yeah, that's taking quite a while because we're having to interview people then and write that up, and my typing skills with 2 things isn't brilliant, but we're working on that. But as a result of our tardiness and the slow pace, we have a free online conference happening on I'm going to get it wrong now, I think it's the Saturday the 6th of November, with Bill Pettit, Judy Sedgman, and a whole load of other people, a bunch of veterans on there, talking about their experience from a principal's perspective, and how this idea could really benefit the wider community. So that's quite fun. But in the main, it's just trying to see what we can do, see how this can help, and I'm just seeing it showing up all over the place. There's a lad I'm speaking to at the moment who I was introduced to 6 weeks ago, got given his phone number. He was about to throw himself off a bridge in Glasgow. We managed to get the police to him. It's his dog that's sitting at my feet at the moment, because he's been remanded in custody for the next 4 weeks. But just having a very brief conversation with him about his experience and looking at the difference between the fun that he was having in our conversation and the despair he was having in our conversation, and how quick he shifted from one to the other and out again, and just played with the boundaries of those. What happened there? What changed? And just pointing back to the fact that it's thought. The only thing that changed was the content of his thought in that moment. And he completely saw that, and it gave him hope. Now, he's not out of the woods yet, because he still does get stuck in that despair, but there's every chance for him to see life completely differently, and to come through that, which is amazing. And so I've got every faith that he'll be okay too, because I know he's okay. He just doesn't quite know it yet. So he's one lad. There's another guy who at the moment has spent the last year in bed. He's been completely bedridden because of the symptoms of his post-traumatic stress. That's it. He's been drugged up to the eyeballs, and he's now going through electric shock therapy to try and help, which has been really quite hard. He's really tired all the time, but he absolutely knows that he wants to get better. And therefore he thinks that it's possible, which is brilliant. And the conversation that we've been having, which is very, very gentle, around what it is to be a human being, he's seen loads from. And he's gone, no one's ever explained this to me like this. This seems really simple. And I said, well, that's because it is. It is really simple, but we live in a complicated world that looks for complicated answers. And it's all been done innocently, but actually the answer's normally right in front of our noses. It's actually right inside us. And that's what's so cool. So yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, exploring this understanding, initially to try and help one person. But then I very quickly saw that it has way more possible. Look at that music as well. I don't know if you're getting that over.
Can you hear the music?
Can you hear the music?
Just to emphasize
Yeah,
the
it's just,
point.
it's all queued up. Yeah, I saw there's way more potential in it than that, and we're just having fun uniting people with who they really are, who they've lost sight of, and that they are okay. And the wonderful thing about the simplicity of the principles is something that the military community will really resonate with, because they've been taught to look for simple plans. They've been taught to look for what feels right, to trust their senses. The amount of stories that you probably will have heard of soldiers on operations feeling uncertain or uneasy about a certain situation before it happens. And it's their consciousness being aware that things might go a bit wrong at the moment, but that's giving them a warning and getting them alert. And also of people being completely present in the moment, despite the fact the world's upside down for them. And a slight misconception that feeling of being alive in that moment is driven by the circumstances of that, and therefore that they need to go and find more high octane life to be able to experience that again, rather than knowing that that is their true essence to start off with.
I remember when we once did a retreat. I remember we did a retreat in Kendal, and it was a 3-day retreat. And we had a lady come in on the last day, and the room was so quiet. These people had sat down with us for 3 days, and the room was quiet. We'd kind of gone through the principles, and we'd had 2 days of questions. Like initially day one, you get all the questions, you get the people sitting there going, what's this got to do with me? You get the people going, yeah, but, and you get the people that go, well, this sounds like, you get all those things. And on day 2, people generally start to chill out and settle down. And by day 3, the room was silent. That's when people are really listening, when they're quiet. I used to think I was a good listener. I was a shit listener. I still can be a shit listener sometimes, but more I've found like there is an art to listening, and you're not listening when you're thinking. Your thoughts inside your head will drown out even this music that's next door. It will drown it out. So these people were sat down and they were just listening. And this lady came in on the last day, which we don't normally encourage in the slightest, but it was a friend. And I remember this lady saying, you're talking crap. I'm like, okay. She said, you telling me that circumstance does not create experience? We're saying, yes, absolutely, 100%. That's what we're saying. And she said, so are you telling me that somebody in a war is not scared when they're being shot at? I said, well, some people will be. I said, but I also have friends who have been in the military who said they have never felt more alive than when they were being shot at, when they were in full-blown conflict. They said they've never felt more alive, more present, more in the moment, more life is here and now, and it's real. Here I am. Fucking hell, I'm wide awake. I said, so yes, if it was true that circumstance did create experience, would it not be that all soldiers would either experience the fear, or would it not be that all soldiers would experience this wide awakeness? But I'm sure you can speak that in those circumstances, there are many different types of experiences, and therefore many different types of reactions and behavior. Completely.
And the complete spectrum of that can happen in one person, in a very short period of time, and certainly across, that small unit that might be there. So, one of the lads I've been speaking to was in one of the guys had literally just been blown up, lost both his legs, and they were trying to fight to keep him alive. They were being shot at. There was somebody else injured as well. And 2 of the younger guys were completely shocked. Not surprisingly, the world has just been turned upside down. There are people that I know and love that are lying around in bits, and we're trying to keep them alive. And there are other people trying to kill me at the moment. Well, one of the other lads just looked at them and went, okay, yep, I know where they are. Fellas, back in the room, this is what we need to pay attention to. We'll sort the rest of it out later. And it made sense to them. And they went, oh, yeah, okay, fine. And then got on with their jobs. But they were just lost in that moment for a split second. And it just took someone else to give them a nudge to get them back out of it. And it makes perfect sense that you will be the most alive in the most dangerous point, because everything about us is designed to thrive all the time. So when our life is in danger, it makes perfect sense for our system to shut out all the background noise that's created in our head, chatting away, going, you can pick that up later. This is the only show in town. Concentrate on this one. Once you've done that, you can pick that baggage up again later and listen to it. But at the moment, that's it. Sort that out and you'll be okay. And it's amazing, because when you point to the truth of that, people go, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And you know, I remember being very shocked and slightly worried the first time I heard Bill Pettit talk about suicidal thoughts being love letters from your heart. Whoa, where's that coming from? But actually, when you listen to Bill and how he explains that, he's pointing to the fact that everything about us is designed to thrive. So therefore, even thoughts about killing ourselves have a purpose that's trying to help us. That's slightly counterintuitive, but when you scratch away at it, basically, it's all the lights are on the dashboard are red, saying, stop, you're going in the wrong direction. This is going to end badly if you keep going this way. Well, that's a really helpful sign then, isn't it? But what people tend to do is, because they're classed as thoughts that we shouldn't have, then people tend to hold on to them themselves, and then they have them repetitively, and they start to believe them. Or they feel that bad that it is the only thing they can think of as the way out, because they innocently don't understand that it's trying to help keep them alive. And it's nuts.
I also think when it comes to things like that, suicide thought, it's like one of the greatest things I ever realized was that the entirety of reality is something created from something that we call thought. And, you know, we literally draw this reality out of our being. We are literally, from within our being, we are drawing forth the reality that we encounter as our life in every single moment. It's like I describe it as like a fountain of knowledge, infinite knowledge. That's what consciousness is. That's what the mind is. That's what thought is. It's infinite knowledge. And it's like, so continuously we are drawing forth a reality not from outside of ourselves, but from within our very own being. When I say within the being, I'm not talking about the body. It's no place to go looking for, where is this taking place? The body is responding to this force that is life itself, that is our very own essence, that is our being. And so we're constantly drawing forth out of ourselves a reality, and however it is showing up is what we have drawn forth from within ourselves by a thought. And we get a lot of people coming to us with the suicide thought. Mm-hmm. And it's such an interesting thing, because some thoughts we take really, really seriously. And some thoughts we just think are stupid. Some thoughts we think are pointless. Some thoughts we think are really interesting. Some thoughts we think are great. Some thoughts we think make us really clever. Some thoughts we use to beat the shit out of ourselves with. Etc., etc., etc. I think one of the nicest things when you start to realize, like what the principles is pointing to, is that all things are the same thing. That includes this reality that we encounter as our life. That includes the suicide thought. And remember, we mentioned this on a couple of retreats ago. A fella, God bless him, he didn't even want to be there. He only came just to appease his missus, like, and have an easy time. He tried to commit suicide 2 weeks before. I think a couple of people might have been on that. Yeah. And I just said, you know, the suicide thought is born of exactly the same stuff, the same place, as the what flavor yogurt do I want today thought. In essence, in its true essence, there is no difference between the suicide thought and what flavor yogurt do I want? Do I fancy tea? Do I fancy coffee? Where should I go today? Oh, look at me, it's raining. Oh, it's a beautiful day. Look at that. What jumper should I put on today? Should I put on? I wonder how hot it is outside. It's all but drawn forth from the same place. And so when I personally realized that, when I realized, shit, the whole game of life is one of thought. Sorry, Mel. The whole game of life is one of thought. You can't escape this point. And I encourage people, go look for it. Go and look for the exception. That is not thought. And pretty quickly, you'll realize what's searching for it is thought, and the answer it's searching for is a thought. And you start to put two and two together and realize that one equals infinity. It's all the same thing. And one of the things that I really was when you and I and Jen and Ben had a conversation. You know, I remember it being one of these things that I find really common. You know, Jen and I have traveled the world to many different places talking about this, and everybody thinks they're different. Everybody thinks they're an exception. You know, we live in a world of such dualistic proportions. Do you know what I mean? Like they're different to me. You know, you see it in religion, you see it in color, you see it in culture, you see it in mental health. Like, oh, nobody's as, what if I'm the most fucked up person on the planet? What if I'm and this was me, I'm speaking from me. So you're a testament to this point. The most fucked up person on the planet. It's like, what if it's me? What if I'm the exception to the rule? And I remember you saying one of the greatest problems that we have when it comes to working with mental health and outside influences, outside people who are outside the military, even outside of their regiment, was it you said?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the paras will only paras understand paras, and only whatever else. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's like we become kind of so hefted and cliquey in our minds as to who can help us and what can help us. Can we talk a little bit about that, about how, you know, what you came across, what one of the things you were saying, which I think is so beautiful, is this literally applies to all people. It's like completely. We're talking about this tonight from a military point of view, military perspective, but it's like I remember that conversation, and you were saying how, you know, one of the most difficult things is cracking this nut of difference.
Completely. I can talk to that. So quite a lot of the people I speak to think that they are different from society, that the army has changed them, and that they won't be able to relate, or a civilian will not be able to relate to them and what they've experienced, and therefore aren't able to help. So that creates a sort of wall of, well, that's just not going to happen. And as that's, you know, I had this very conversation with one individual where he went, well, the person in the NHS that's been assigned to me is 22. She's just qualified. She had no idea of what I did in the army or in the police. I can see she looks shocked and scared. Okay, I can see that. She doesn't have that experience, but you also don't know what she knows. But we'll come back to that in a minute. So let's have a look at who you are comfortable talking to. So okay, you're talking to me, but we work together, we've served together, and I trusted you with my life because you were driving for me, and you trusted me with your life because I was making the decisions. And collectively, we all just trusted each other because actually that's the only way we were going to get through everything. That's just the way it works. But that was in our platoon. So 10 platoon was definitely better than 9 platoon and 11 platoon. 100%, we were the best, weren't we? Yes, we were. Okay, what did we think of them? We thought they were rubbish. Yeah, correct. Okay, so what about when it was C Company and we were all in C Company and we're talking about 4 platoon, or we're definitely all better. Yeah, we are, aren't we? And you can just see how you get these small little cliques of who's better than who, which is fine. It's competition's fun, it works, and it's helpful to a certain degree. It's also made up. But that's, it's fine while it's being treated within a sort of healthy, fun way. And it sort of boils its way up through a battalion to, you'll have into battalion sporting events where everyone's baying for everybody else's blood in a sporting sense, and they're rubbish and we're amazing. But yesterday I hated you because we were playing you in sport. Whatever it happens to be, there's lots of division. From a healthy competitive point of view, take those individuals out of that environment and plonk them in the real world, and they start to think that they don't fit, that they're different. And there's lots of chat about being institutionalized and the army's changed you, and people buy into that. And it's not healthy, unfortunately. So we're having this conversation about, okay, well, I know why you and I have a connection. That makes sense. And the same with the rest of the platoon. So that's good. And actually the rest of the regiment, to the point that you could speak to any other rifleman and have an instant connection because you knew each other's history as a regiment. You had shared experience in potentially places you've been and people you knew. So there's a connection. So that makes sense. But I pointed out to this lad that his best friend that he made since leaving the army was in a different regiment, the Royal Engineers, and they'd never served together. They just happened to bump into each other in the pub. So, but then that same rule applies. You both served in the British Army, and you've got a shared ethos and a shared experience and a shared set of language. So it's not surprising that you've connected. So, okay, well, so let's park that. Your parents, they've not served. Oh no, but they're family, so they're in. Your brother did serve, so that he's got a double ticket. Your girlfriend, she's a hairdresser. She's never served in the forces. She was never in the police. Oh no, you fancy her, so she gets a ticket into your club. I said, well, what's the common denominator amongst all of these different groups? And he just shook his head and no. So, well, they're all human beings, and you've been prepared to be vulnerable with them. You've been prepared to give a little bit more of you than you would someone else. And they all care about you. So you're prepared to be a little bit more vulnerable with them, which is great. But that girl you've been connected with in the NHS is doing the job that she's doing because she cares about people and she wants to help you. And what she's confronted with when you're in her office is you sitting on the other side of the desk with your arms folded going, you can't help me. There's no way you can help me. And she's sitting on the other side of her desk going, he's probably right. So they've got these two walls built between them based on thoughts that they're having about how they can and can't help each other. So how about next time you go and see her, that you just go in with an open mind and see that she's someone that cares, that wants to help, and see what happens. At which point he gave me a hug and pushed me out the door because he just went, oh, right, yeah, that's blown my mind. And it's fascinating because at the start of the conversation, I can only connect with veterans. The other side of that conversation was, oh, I can connect with anybody. That's a bit scary. But also opened his eyes up massively to what the possibilities were and where that support could come from. And the fact that he could support anybody himself if he wanted to. And it's just the subtlety of people seeing something differently that they've held as a really strong belief in the past for whatever reason. And for to some degree, it's helped protect them. And that's great. It's served a purpose to a point in time until it ceased to be helpful. And that's cool. That's cool because, again, coming back to that business of everything about us is designed to help us thrive. Well, that's true of the beliefs that we have to a point in time until we see something fresh and new. And when we see something fresh and new, the thing that doesn't make sense anymore, we're quite happy to screw up and throw in the bin because it doesn't make sense. We move on.
That is one. Jen, do you want to split? Anything you want to say?
No, it's fine.
That is one of the. That's one of the.
Got something to say. I feel like you've got something to say.
No, I'm just aware.
I'm going to plug the laptop in. No, thank you, John.
It's okay. It's okay.
That's one of the things that the principles kind of brings to people. I know there's some new people on this call, and when we talk about the principles, it can sound a little bit, what the fuck are you talking about? What are these principles? And well, principles are something that just is, it's something which you can compare things to. It's something which you can kind of hold up as like a rule of thumb, something you can, like a paradigm to which you can compare things against. And it will always stand up to scrutiny. That's what's so good about a principle. Rusty's just farting, it stinks.
I'm blaming Rusty.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you don't. I hope it's Rusty.
It was
because
the new
if that
boy.
is you, mate.
You need to
I'm
go
taking
to
you
the
to the
doctor.
vet. Yeah. But the principles.
Not me.
No, I won't do it. It is Rusty, I promise. Yeah, the principles, they literally cover all things. And they are descriptive words, and we must always remember this. When we communicate in words, and it's really, really easy to memorize words. You know, I've got poems in my head that I can memorize, and I've got a lot of Latin for trees and plants and useless stuff. I've got lots of words inside here. But those words are words. They're not the objects. You know, if I say watch, the word watch, everybody goes, oh, yeah, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about that. But a word is just a noise. That's a thing made of metal and whatnot. The words are only ever descriptive. That's all a word ever is. It's just a communication tool. And so when we talk about these principles, it's really easy to memorize the words. And that's what we've been trained to do since we're very little, is to memorize things and get tested on it. And we generally think our IQ is simply a measurement of memory, really. Memory is useful, but it's limited. It's always based in the past. And so what the principles kind of bring to this conversation, to the world, is it brings to the world a constant, something that's constant, that is applicable to the individual who believes he is totally different from everybody else on Civvy Street, to the NHS worker sat there going, friggin' hell, how do I work with somebody with PTSD? To Rusty, to trees, to insects, to whatever. It is literally the nature of consciousness. And the principles were three principles that Sydney Banks described. And Sydney Banks was a man who I listened to, introduced to by Sue. And with Sue and Sid, an awakening took place that changed my life. It was the realization into the principles. It wasn't the words that I memorized. That, you know, when you memorize a word, it can't actually do anything. You must go beyond the words. And when I stepped beyond the words in that moment, everything opened up. And I don't really want to go into too much detail about all that. But I suddenly realized I was totally fine. And my family know that at that time, it was a very stressful time. But the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, the words that we're familiar with, you know, everybody's heard the word mind. Many people assume we're talking about the brain. We're not talking about the brain. We're talking about an intelligence that creates the brain. We're talking about an intelligence that exists before form has even started to manifest. It exists. In fact, it is literally all that exists. What Sydney Banks described as the universal mind, we tend to think of mind as being my mind, your mind. No, that's thought. That's thought. Effectively, we don't have minds. We are all one mind. And then he spoke about universal consciousness. You know, there isn't a single being on this planet that would not stand there and go, of course I'm conscious. Of course I am consciousness. Many people describe themselves as having consciousness. I want to make a distinction. We are consciousness. We don't have it. If we have it, it can be removed. It can be taken away. It'd be something you could gain or lack in. But that's not the case. Consciousness just is. And you were born from it. And then there's thought. And thought is a descriptive word to describe what mind consciousness does, is it creates. It's a constant creative power. And in the Bible, they call it God. And I spoke to a beautiful man from Afghanistan the other day. He calls it Allah. You call it the quantum field. You give it all these names, but it exists. It's real, and every single person on earth is a conscious thing. Is conscious. They think and they create, whether they like it or not. Whether they're creating heaven or hell, they're creating. It's coming from inside them via thought. So I just wanted to kind of clear up, when we talk about the principles, we're talking about one fundamental fact that appears to have three different kind of characteristics. But really, it's just one fundamental fact. And everybody is that fundamental fact. That's why people speak about the oneness of life. The oneness, the one God, the blah, 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 whatever words they want to use. Just words, just words. But it is through using the principles, these principles of mind, consciousness, and thought, that we create reality. Everybody, and speak for myself, most people in this lifetime get lost and assume that they observe reality. We assume that we are literally observers of reality. And we observe what's going on, and therefore we feel the goings on of the world. We feel the stresses. The traffic causes me stress. Rain gives me SAD, seasonally associated affective disorder, whatever it's called. Or a past trauma gives me PTSD. You know, we live in these ideas that reality is somehow external to ourselves. When something happens, it creates a reality for us. We are literally observers of reality, and we are powerless. That's how it appears. But what Sid kind of brought to the table was reality doesn't work like that. And we must wake up to how reality works if we want to move forward as a society, as a community, as a species. If we want to realign ourselves, find mental health, if we want to address the world's problems, first of all, we must have to understand what we're working with. What is reality and where does it take place? And what Sid spoke about was we are all creators of reality. Every single one of us is experiencing a reality that looks real. Everybody's reality looks real to them. So real, in fact, that you would never question it. Why would you question reality? It's real. Is it? Is it real? How real is it? It's as real as thought. It's as real as you think it is. But even when it's as real as you think it is, it's still thought. And I think when people start to wake up to that, you know, when you speak to your veterans and stuff, and we speak to people, whoever we're speaking with, it's such a beautiful thing to know. Because once you see this for yourself, it's like, I remember you telling me about one time, somebody was asking Sid Banks, well, how do you speak to veterans? How do you speak to people affected by war? How do you speak to hostages? How do you speak to this? How do you speak to that? And Sid said, see this for yourself, and you will know how to speak to that person. Because you will, if you find this for yourself first, you will know fundamentally that you are so whole, you cannot even talk about it. There is nothing to be broken in the first place. And once you've seen that, you see it in all people and all things, and you see the perfection of life. You start to see past the illusion of reality. Because ultimately, reality is an illusion. It's created from thought. I was a person who struggled massively with mental health problems, anger and depression and anxieties, and worries about the future. They were all thoughts. And when I wasn't thinking them, I wasn't experiencing them. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up for people who are perhaps new to the principles. What we're talking about is is something that is fundamental. Everybody is a conscious thinking being. And everybody is the creator of their reality. And it looks real. That's why Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you. The place that everybody was looking for. It's inside you. You are it. The Creator's kingdom is within you. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up and give people a sense of that. And because I know that what you work with, Dave, it's a hot topic at the moment.
Mhm.
You know, it's on the news an awful lot. And it sounds almost derogatory for me to say that, you know, somebody suffering with PTSD is simply suffering a misunderstanding of thought.
Completely. That's it. And it's people get scared thinking that that's all it is. It's got to be more complicated than that because it feels viscerally unpleasant. Well, it does. But again, if it comes back to the business of everything that we experience is trying to help us thrive, not just survive, then a flashback that feels absolutely real and petrifies you in any given moment is turning up, trying to tell you something. And it's then not something to be scared of, it's what's it trying to tell me. So I certainly don't go trying digging around in what the content of that is because it's irrelevant really. What's it trying to tell you at the moment? How does it feel? Does it feel comfortable or uncomfortable? Those are the only two things that we really need to be aware of. And if it's feeling comfortable, then we're probably doing all right. And if it's feeling uncomfortable, it's trying to tell us something. What's it trying to tell me? And for the vast majority of the people that I'm speaking to that are struggling with flashbacks and things like that, there's something else going on in their world at the moment that's causing them. No, language is wrong because again, it sounds like the outside world's causing the problem. It's not. Their experience of their reality in that moment is causing them to feel stressed. So they're feeling stressed based on their thoughts about something else that's going on, and their body's going, oh, stress. Done that before. Boom. Here's something really stressful in your past. Put it in. Press play. You've got this stress thing nailed. Look how well you did last time. And when they see it that way, when they hear it explained like that, they go, oh, well, that does make sense, doesn't it? Because it's like physical pain in that sense. It's not pleasant at all, but physical pain is there for a purpose. It's to stop us using the thing we've heard. We understand that mostly. Sometimes we forget and we bash ourselves and it reminds us that it's sore, saying, please leave me alone, I'm trying to fix you. Well, we get that. Well, that's the same. If we're feeling mentally uncomfortable in a certain situation or in a certain reality in us in that moment, what's it trying to tell me? And it's normally slow down a bit. Give yourself a bit of time to, nothing's on fire. You're safe. That's the first thing I try and get the guys to think about is, am I physically safe at the moment? Are the people I care about safe? Yeah. Okay. I'm now just having a shit time. Cool. No one's going to get hurt in this moment now. It's just an unpleasant experience you're having. And you don't need to do anything to make it go away. It will pass. Actually, the more you poke and prod around in it to try and make it go, the more it sticks to about. So actually, just notice it. Does it feel uncomfortable? Calm down. Just bear with it for the moment. It will pass. And they know it does because it always has done in the past. It's just they've constantly been trying to find the thing to turn it off. Well, they don't need to because it will always go. Fresh thought always pops up. Normally when you don't want it to. So actually, if you're trying to fight it, that's fine, but it's not necessarily healthy. Just leave it alone and see what happens because it will change. Yeah. And it will change instantly. And that's what the conversation I was having with the owner of the dog at my feet. He was going from having a good old laugh about the past and fun times and people that we knew in common that I'd never met him until that day, but we knew people and we had stories we could share about those individuals and we were having a great time. And then he remembered about the things he was finding difficult, and he burst into tears and get really morose. And then he'd remember that we were having fun. And he was like a toddler,
same chair.
sat in the same chair, in the same conversation, having hugely different experiences, polar opposites of experience, moment to moment. And that's how life works. And that's the beauty of it. That's what the principles are pointing at. They're not actually saying do anything. It's just,
No,
they're there.
Yeah.
They exist in all of us, and they're what's driving our experience, whether we know it or not. And that from those of us that have seen it and had experience of that, it makes perfect sense to us. It also makes perfect sense that it's playing out in everybody, whether they're aware of it or not. And we therefore know that they are absolutely okay, even if they think they're not. Well, then there's nothing for me to do other than try and shine a light for them. Maybe have a look over there rather than in the dark cupboard, because every time you go back in the dark cupboard, you're having a fairly horrendous time. So maybe step out of the cupboard and have a look in the other direction, turn a torch on, or go in with a friend.
it's funny because the old way of psychology is you've got a dark cupboard.
Let's get in it.
Get in that dark cupboard.
Yeah.
Find the answer in the dark cupboard. And it's like, well, I can't see anything. It's frigging dark. And I know it's a shithole. Why am I getting back into this cupboard? Right, come back next week and we'll have another look in the cupboard.
Yeah.
And then come back the week after that and we'll get back in the cupboard again. And it's like, if the answer to happiness lay in ruminating over why do I feel like shit, we would have found it by now as a species. We'd have found the answer to that, because that's all we have done is we have looked for, we've gone into our grief and we've gone into our pain and we've gone into our past and we've examined it and we've wondered why we never start to feel better. This is the thing with like PTSD. Again, I don't want to cause any offense, but I want to point out how simple this actually is. I do know this is an emotive subject. And it's not treated like this in the mainstream. It's treated as an illness. It's not an illness. It's a thought. It's like addiction. Addiction is a thought. That's not an illness either. When an addict isn't thinking about drugs or they're just minding their own business, they're getting on with their day, where is the addiction? Where's the cravings? Where's the addiction when they're not craving? It's only when their mind goes, cigarette, cocaine, have a joint, oh, fuck yeah, I really fancy a joint now. And then all of a sudden they start to feel that craving and they go, oh shit, I'm an addict or whatever. And then they misassociate that feeling, a feeling, as an addiction. No, the feeling is a feeling. The thought is a thought. Thought and feeling are, you don't feel anything unless you're thinking it. It's just a simple rule of the way that life works. If I've got some angry shit going on inside my head, I feel angry. If I think about things that piss me off, I feel pissed off. If I think about things that lighten my heart and fill me full of joy and compassion and love, I feel joy and compassion and love. It's really simple. If we keep on thinking time and time again about things, and we're trained to do this, figure it out, figure out the problem, figure out the problem, figure out the problem. Well, here we go. Here we have the answer to the problem, and it's the answer to all problems. Everything that we experience is thought. It's that simple. 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 We're only ever experiencing thought. You can't not experience thought. It's how reality is created. It pre-exists humanity. This force, it pre-exists humanity. It created humanity. Human beings didn't invent thought. They didn't invent consciousness. Human beings didn't even invent human beings. We're talking about a deep intelligence, deeply intelligent system that, Dave, you've so beautifully described it. All these horrible feelings, they're trying to wake us up. To this day, I cannot explain why. When you go beyond this reality, it is just the most beautiful, divine thing you can't even describe. To this day, I don't know why it's love, but it is. And this is the thing people start to wake up to. You, Dave, are a really beautiful, loving man. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I now in my life, I experience far more love. Jen, you are a deeply loving human being. It's like people who come across this for whatever reason, they tend to experience the experience of more love as they kind of reconnect with themselves. They come out of the fear. They start to see what the fear is made of. The fear is a thought.
Mhm.
Thought creates fear. Thought creates anxiety. Thought creates grief. Thought creates PTSD. Thought creates OCD. Thought creates schizophrenia. Thought creates every single experience. Now, when I talk about thought, I have to tell you now, I haven't got a clue what it is. I don't know what thought is, and I know I can't. So I don't even try and understand. I don't try and know what thought is, but I am aware that it creates an illusion that we call reality. And if it wasn't that creates and if it wasn't that reality is an illusion, there wouldn't be a single argument on the face of this planet. There would be no need for an army, because there'd be no need for a war. There'd be no need for a war because we'd all see the same reality. There'd be nothing to fight over. There'd be nothing to argue about. Reality would just be reality, and we'd all just see it, and it would be as simple as that. Oh, look, we're all seeing reality. This is just the way it is. There would be nothing to talk about. There would be zero language on the planet. We would not have a language because there would be no need to talk about anything because we would all already see it. We'd all just know. And I think when you start to see this, this is so simple. It's so simple. It's so simple. Thought is infinite. Is it possible to get to the end of thought? New ideas, music, poetry, words, inventions. Is it possible to get to the end of it? Is it possible to ever kind of get to the end of, we've got some like lighting system. Is it possible that in 20 years' time, we have a totally different lighting system that we haven't yet drawn out of our being, the knowledge yet, out of our being, and brought it into the world and manifested it? Of course, there's inventions to come that we haven't even dreamt up yet, but they will be dreamt up from thought in exactly the same way as this amazing laptop. I haven't got a frigging clue how the hell it works. Sat in front of me, has been dreamt up from thought. It existed in thought before it existed in this world. And this is how everything comes into the world. It comes in via mind. Every single thing, the house you are sat in is a thought created physical manifestation. We figure it all out. We just figure it out. What an amazing gift we have, and we use it clumsily. Because when we live with such non-awareness of how it works, what reality is. So we use it clumsily. And it seems like when you start to wake up to this, it's like in certain religions and in mysticism and whatnot, they talk about changes in consciousness, raising levels of consciousness. And when people start to wake up to how life actually works, their consciousness raises, and their consciousness raises, so does their thought patterns. They start to get new thought, they start to get new experiences, they start to get new reality. And this is the only way we can change the world, is by changing ourselves. And the only way we change ourselves is when we allow ourselves to just be quiet. I love what you said there, Dave. You said effectively, but paraphrasing, there's nothing to do with the principles. You can't implement them. They're already implemented. You can't be more the principles. You are already the principles. This isn't a description of how to live. We're not talking about live a loving life. We're talking about, do you know how reality works? Do you know what life is? And anybody who discovers what life is will turn around and go, I haven't got a clue, but it's frigging beautiful. I don't know.
I think the most exciting thing about it is we know what we know right now, and we'll be learning every moment of every day for the rest of our lives. And therefore, there's a lot to learn. How exciting is that? That means that there's always going to be something more to see. And that's amazing, because the only way is up from that perspective. And it's really cool. And you'll learn from every conversation you have with anybody, if you are open to that. I had a wonderful conversation with both of my nephews yesterday, 14 and 16. The 14-year-old, I was asking him how school was going. Well, I like PE, but I don't like science. I said, okay, we sort of unpick that a little bit. So, well, most of that stuff you're doing in science, and he's doing all three sciences, relates to PE in a certain way. If you need to understand about biology to understand how the human body works, to be able to be good at PE. Physics from a lever's point of view, and understanding how to move weights around and all that kind of stuff. And from a chemical point of view, that's what's happening inside all of us all the time. And he went, I hadn't thought of it like that. But that it was just a little opportunity for a light bulb to come on. And who knows what he'll do with it. But something shifted in him. He saw the connection between something he loved and things he thought were boring. I went, okay, well, maybe there's something in that.
And his reality changed.
His reality shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
Who knows what he's going to do with that? And my 16-year-old nephew is at college at the moment learning to weld, and he finds some of it really dull and boring. But he also learned what he might be able to earn working for BAE Systems in Barrow as a welder. And he's going, oh, well, that's what I want to be. I said, okay, cool. Well, let's concentrate on what it is you're learning at the moment, because that leads to that. And I went, oh. So, well, what are you earning at the moment doing the odd jobs you're doing? This much a day. Okay, well, 2 hours of what your friend is now earning, having got qualified, is more than a day's work that you're getting at the moment. And that light bulb came on for him and went, oh, all right then. So maybe I won't look at the health and safety stuff as boring anymore. It's a means to an end. But he hadn't put it all together. Didn't need to, but his reality hopefully has shifted and been able to join those dots for him. Very, very minor stuff, but light bulbs in both those boys of oh, and that's what's so cool. There's an ability to see something fresh in whatever it is that we're doing. Yeah. And if it feels uncomfortable and boring or stale or whatever it happens to be, we're just not seeing something right now. Well, that's okay. That uncomfortable feeling is the thing that's saying there's more to see here. Sit with it, see what happens. Something's going to shift. And when it does, it will feel better and you'll see something new. That's cool. Whatever it happens to be. And for me, yes, I'm dealing with some guys and girls that are on the edge of existence in some instances, but there's hope for them, despite how unhopeful they feel in that moment, because they are everything that they're searching for. They're just not aware of it. And what can we all do is help point them in that direction, just by being us, just by caring, just by loving, just by connecting, because that's it. It's human to human connection. And it doesn't matter what your background is. We can all help each other. And that's what's so amazing.
Yeah.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. We're going to open this up to questions, insights, just anything you want to share. So we're back in 10 minutes. So according to my watch, which is probably wrong, probably about past. Seems that. Right. Colette was just sharing something at brew time, and it was just something interesting. If I'm honest, I only heard little snippets of it, but I was intrigued. So I'm like, Colette, come on, sit up here. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, I will. So it was just the other day, my son had been having problems with his partner, and they'd finished. So he'd said, could he come for a week and spend a week with us as he was struggling? So knowing about the 3 principles, I was sat there, said, oh yeah, of course. And I was thinking to myself, what can I point him to? What can I say? What things, about thought can make him feel better? And all those things. And as I was thinking all this, I didn't see at first I was going more and more down the rabbit hole, so to speak, myself. And all of a sudden, this thought came in my mind, oh, you think he's broken? And you think you're broken too. And just with that thought, I'll just let everything else go. All this, what I can do to help him, how can I make him feel, I just let it all go. And then just thought to myself, what do I tell other people? And it's, I say, go within, turn towards God, and God always turns towards you. And just with that thought, it was like, boom, in that instant, this love just filled me up. Unconditional love, so much so that I felt like I was floating. And it was so big and powerful that I just started crying but laughing at the same time, because it was just so in that place of filling me up. That was the gift. It felt like a gift, and I felt like, yeah, I'm okay and he's okay. In fact, everything is okay. And when Mark came home about an hour later, and I was telling him, and I still started crying because I was still filled with it. But it's not a tears of sadness or anything. It was just tears of relief, joy, gratitude. These are just words I'm trying to explain, but it still was more than that, what filled me up. But it was just this knowing that, yeah, we are okay. And this within me, this love that I'm feeling now is there for me anytime I want. It's just there, and it's there for me. It's there for my son. So when he did come, I just give him a hug. I didn't have to point him to anything. It was just a big, lovely hug that we had. And I felt within that, I was giving him everything he needed. That was it. So that's what I was sharing in the.
That's cool. Well, it's like whenever you have a really good hug, everything feels fine, doesn't it? Why? Because it's just love, isn't it? And that's, that's cool. Nothing needs to be said.
And there's more information than that. We think we need words to say things to help people, but it's more, this is more powerful than words. And that's what I felt. It felt so powerful. Didn't need words.
It goes beyond the intellect, doesn't it? I think that's beautiful, that love. It really is true. When I think about the change, the thing that changed my life in a moment, like years of fucking stress and being a complete arsehole, and in a moment of that pure unconditional love, which comes from within yourself. It's not coming from an external source. It is coming from within ourself. It's within. And when that comes forward, when that's drawn forth out from within ourselves, it's like the healing that takes place. It's like all of a sudden, something that looks so complicated, looks so simple. He's fine. Shit, he's fine. He doesn't need anything more than a hug. He's all right. The simplicity of life is born from that space. And you start to see, many people don't talk about the Bible, but in the three principles, I do, because I'm not massively versed with the Bible, but it's like I can see that book, what it's trying to do, and the Quran, likewise, the little snippets of stuff that when I've spoken to Muslims, it's like the Quran too speaks of this divine love, and how and the Buddha and Hinduism and Buddhism, absolutely, it's not without reason that this love is spoken about, and how love heals. Love literally heals. It heals the psyche, the soul, and it heals the body. It physically changes the body. It changes our cellular structure. It changes our genetic, our DNA. It changes the DNA. It changes the neurological pathways within the brain. And if people are wanting to kind of have a conversation about science and religion, well, it's pointless, because they are the same thing, really. Just two different descriptive ways of conversations about healing. But ultimately, the answer to all healing is love. It really is, as hippie and as fucking soft as it sounds. Go into the barracks and start preaching that crap.
But no, it's
quite difficult.
No, not at all.
Is it not?
No, because it, the service is, is a brotherhood. that they will do anything for each other.
Nice.
It's love. They know that. They don't necessarily say that,
Yeah.
but they know it. And that yes, Rusty, you know it too. That connection is what we're all right. I'm sorry, Rusty. That connection is what they spot straight away, going, I can see how this makes sense.
Yeah.
Because they were, yeah, that's what it is. That's the bit that they think they're missing and that they're not going to get from society, is because the connection that feels so real for them while they're serving with their brothers or sisters, whatever, they don't think they'll be able to replicate elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's nuts when they realize that, oh, it's nothing to do with service. It's got with my ability to be vulnerable with someone else and them to feel vulnerable with me, and that's okay. It doesn't matter how crap the world that you're living in is, you can have a great time despite that and thrive.
Absolutely.
And that's what's fascinating. Is when they leave that bubble, they think they've left that behind.
Yes.
And that they're never going to experience it again without being back in the bubble.
Yeah.
But the bubble is humanity. It just happens to be where people tend to rub up against the world in a really unpleasant way. They tend to form connections that are stronger than in a normal day-to-day job. So you'll see the same with the police and the fire brigade and the ambulance service. When people go through traumatic experiences in life, the people that they're sharing that experience with, they tend to forge a really strong bond. Well, that bond was there already. There's less thought about it because they're concentrating on survival at that moment. And it goes, well, all of my preconceptions about whoever it might be or where they come from or whatever, there's another human being and we're in this together. But that's it. There's 7 billion people on this planet in it together at the moment. And some of there's a fair amount of friction going on in that. But it doesn't have to be, because they're all in it together. We are all in it together.
And I think when you see what the friction is made of, the friction is literally made of beliefs. What is a belief? We're back to thought again. It's like, that's the only place that friction is actually born. It's born from within ourselves. It's born from thought. And it's like, when that's not seen, you will always have war. As long as that's not seen, we will always have war, because we will always live with the idea. Because I think for me, and I think I speak for many people when I say this, it was like reality was many different things. It was all the things around me. It's people, it's politics, it's all these different realities, and each one is its own like kind of force. Then you've got the future, and then you've got the past. I mean, it never occurred to me that the past doesn't exist. The past literally, where is it? Where is it? It's nowhere. It only exists in our mind as a thought, and it only exists when we're thinking it. The past is a thought, and likewise with the future, it didn't occur to me. It's so obvious when you see it. It's like, how the hell did you never see that? It's because I'd never pointed my consciousness in that direction to kind of become aware of it.
Yeah, and it's innocently done. We don't
Totally.
we don't walk around the world going, oh, I'm now having this thought. This is the experience I'm having from that. It's because we're in it. The only thing we have to experience the world is created by our thoughts. We're swimming in it, and so it's not surprising we can't see it.
Yeah.
But when we do, it's very clear whether we're back there or in the future. And is that helpful? Maybe not. Okay, where am I? Here right now in a conversation. Well, that's the only place that my thoughts make any sense. So let's just stay there. And I could be worrying about my children 300 miles, 200 miles away, and what they're up to. Is that going to help them? Not at all. What's it going to do? It's going to get in my way, innocently get in my way. And that's okay. When I realize that's where my mind is and what's going on. Okay, cool. Well, that doesn't serve me. It certainly doesn't serve them. So let's just let that go. Just see what happens. Be open to new possibilities and see what shows up next. And it's that, it's so simple. And it's easy to see why people will dismiss it. But actually, we are simple creatures at the end of the day.
It's because, yeah, we're always looking for complexity,
Yeah.
aren't we? And it's like, well, look at reality, it's so vivid and colorful, and there's all these sounds and tastes and textures. And yeah, that's what this body experiences by the senses. It's like, I've got little Rusty there, and his reality is so different to mine, especially now he's going deaf. And his eyesight's fading, but he's got this amazing sense of smell. And it's like, Dad's laughing because he knows it's a nightmare sometimes. You can't have any food anywhere. But it's like, you start to see that reality is created from consciousness and the physiology. And it's like, there are beings on this planet, plants and other animals, like sharks come to mind, for example, which have this ability to detect electronic impulses of prey, which are produced in the body of prey. And it's like, the reality, there are many, many infinite realities taking place right now. This is like when you look at this from like a greater point of view, what is reality? Well, it's an infinite experience. Infinite why? Well, because right now, in the only time that exists, there is life and death taking place right now. There is new coming in and there is old leaving, and it's like, it is in a perpetual state of just constant state of change. And it's like, that's what life is. People don't like change. Many people don't like change, but that is what life is. Life is a constant state of change. It's just the way it is. It's like, even when I was depressed, it's like, I wasn't always depressed. It's like the mind changes, and so therefore, so does reality, because reality is the mind in action. But it's like, when you start to see that reality is limited to the senses, it's literally limited to, I can see as a human being with my eyesight a certain spectrum of the light spectrum, a certain bandwidth within the light spectrum. But we know fine well that there is ultraviolet light that we can't see, but we can measure it. And there's infrared light that we can't see, but we can measure it. We know that there are other realities taking place in this room right now. It's like the reality of the magic of the universe that we actually get to encounter is limited by the physiology. But it doesn't mean that these other realities don't exist. So it's like, when we start to open up our minds, when we start to see that the reality that we encounter, that we get to see, is actually limited by the body, it's like it starts to open up the mind to more. And there's something really beautiful about when the mind opens up. And what is an opening mind? It's one that is dropping judgment. It's one that's dropping prejudice and judgment and the theory that it thinks it knows something. It's like, when we drop into that space of I don't know, or quietness, or just stillness, it's like this more that we are, that every single person on earth is. We are more than the limited ideas of who we think we are and what we think we are. This more, we start to draw it forth. We start to draw forth our true essence, our true being, our true nature. And that starts to come to the foreground, as opposed to the ego that we've tended to live out of, who we think we are, how limited we believe ourselves to be, which is, again, is a thought. Our ideas of the past somehow is affecting us now. All these things, all these limitations that we've lived with, which have simply been thought creations that we've adopted and believed. And as we believed it, as Jesus said, as you believe, so it is done to you. And it's like that is such a beautiful thing. I was just having a great conversation with Mark just before. And Mark's a man who sees the complete unlimited nature of this. When Mark speaks, it's a really beautiful thing, because Mark has really seen beyond the limitations that he once lived out of, and many people live out of. And Mark, I believe you live in a world full of an awful lot of excitement, and what a beautiful place to live, an exciting world, an exciting reality that you live in.
Yeah.
And what's changed?
Because I've just realised I create my world. And we're all doing that now. And it's just down to what I believe Whatever I believe to be true is my will. And it's as simple as that. Whatever we believe to be true, that's how we're going to see it. It's just down to belief. I said last week, I was talking to a guy and he said, I get that, but I don't believe that. And it hit me like, you'll never see it the way I do because your belief is stopping you from seeing that. And like people in soldiers and stuff, they have this belief that they've gone through that and they're going to keep going because until you get them to change their belief, they'll always see it the same way. Which opening up for people to see that it's a belief, and when you drop that belief, it goes like that.
Completely.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Straight away. And then that becomes the point that we are then creating our whole world. The whole world is me expanded out. That's why we can affect everyone else. Like Claire with Michael, there's not always a problem, but you always see that there's something wrong with Michael's. Now, I think Michael's fine because I know he's like me and there's never a problem. He never comes to me with a problem. I never see a problem. Michael, in my life, is fine. Always has been. So that's my belief that Michael's fine. So in my world, he's fine. In Claire's world, there's a problem. There's always a problem.
Yeah. Till I saw this the other
Till you
day,
saw this, yeah.
and I realised that exactly how I did think, like, oh, and I've got to fix it, sort of thing. So I was taking, like, doing a double things that was wrong. He was broken, I have to fix it because it makes me broken. And then the other day I saw the truth of it all and just felt this love, which had information in that I felt. And now I feel completely different, and I know I'll never feel like that again. And it felt so light. I felt I was lifting off the seat.
So that's what I've seen, is that I am whatever I believe with feeling. That's what I see, and that's what I create constantly, all the time. So if you open yourself up to not believing the things and believing there's more to life and expand yourself, because that's all we are, expansion all the time. When I open up to the belief that I do create my world, and whatever I think and believe to be true will happen, test it and see.
Yeah.
So when you start and test it and see, and you see it there, then that becomes belief. So you test it a bit more, that becomes belief. And before you know it, oh my God, I can do it.
Well, that's what people have called faith, isn't it?
That's it, faith. Yeah.
You know, people talk about having faith, and you find faith, you find it, or it finds you, whichever way you want to say that. It's like, but you find it because you have that faith, because you find something that's true. You know, when we talk about reality, it's like, well, my reality looks very real to me, and sometimes I can argue my reality as being a fact. You know, and then I get this other person arguing their reality as a fact, and before you know it, we're in a discussion. When it comes to this point, there is no discussion. And that can sound like a really arrogant statement. It can sound like, oh, Dave's saying he's got the end of conversation. But no, it really is the end of conversation, because it's before conversation. What we're talking about when we talk about thought is we're talking about before conversation. We're talking about the force that everybody already is, that all things already are. Before conversation. It's a simple fact. You cannot have a conversation, you can't even have a dialogue without first having the thought to what we're going to discuss, how we're going to discuss it, what's my point of view, how am I going to argue this? And this is where the world has got caught up. It's got caught up in the details. It comes before the details. What we're talking about, in essence, comes before the details. The devil's in the details, as they say. The thing you're not looking for, the thing you really do not want in your life, is in the details. Go before the details. Go before this illusion. Go before this illusion of life. Go before this illusion of reality. And it's like, well, what do you have? Well, you have this inexplicable force of love. That is all knowledge. That is all thought. That is all things. It's just the way it is. It can't be changed. It's just the way it is. It's not an arrogant thing. It's just the way it is. And many, many people are waking up to it now, waking up to it, waking up to it. We're speaking to many people who are waking up to this. And this is where the simplicity comes in. It's like when you start to see that all things there is a logic to this as well. It's like when you start to see that all things that you experience are thought. It's all the same thing. Like an ocean produces an infinite amount of shaped and sized waves, but it doesn't matter. It's still all the ocean. It's still all water, whether it's a tsunami or a tiny ripple. It's still just the ocean. It's like when you stop associating as the waves, as the misunderstanding, like an ocean going, fuck, I'm just this limited little wave, or I'm this massive tsunami. It's like when the ocean stops aligning itself as a wave, it starts to realize the true magnitude of what it really is, the magic that it really is, the ability to create an infinite amount of waves in infinite ways, which look in every single wave is different, but it's all born of water. You start to see it's simple. It's like what we've called mental illness, what we've called like miracles, what we've called placebo, what we've called all these things. We're talking about a fundamentally massive force. It lives all things. It lives the same thing that lives all humanity, lives the insect world, lives the tree world, lives the fungal kingdom, lives every single being, whether they're in this relative reality or beyond it or outside of it, or it's all within the same thing. It's all the same thing. And that's why the mystics have called it the dream of life, because it is literally a dream. It is literally like a dream. It can change in a moment, just like a dream. As you were saying, Dave, you know, on the battlefield, you can go through presence and then next minute fear, and as the mind changes, so does the reality and the experience. And you know, you only need to get a little glimpse of this and suddenly things start to change and you start to see differently. And I think that's the beautiful thing. It's like, and there's nowhere to get to. There's none of this. When I see this, I'm going to be like this. No, that's another thought. That's another thought creating another reality. It's like there is nowhere to get to. There's only ever that happening. But as we start to wake up to it, as Mark said before, you know, as we were stood outside, when you don't know how this works, you are so clumsy with it. And you wonder why life's chaos, why life's so difficult. Because it's like, rather than you dreaming the dream is dreaming you, which I suppose is actually more accurate. Now I say that. But it's like, as you start to wake up to the dream state, as you start to wake up and realize it is thought, it's like mental illness, PTSD, friggin' hell, PTSD is memory is thought. Wow. The only thing that I actually thought I suffered from was actually a thought. It's a thought. It's like, and I don't know about anybody else, I still get much of my friggin' mental thoughts that I've had my whole life. You know, it's not that I don't get these mental thoughts. I get all kinds of mentally, legal, immoral thoughts, and thoughts I don't tell people for fear of social isolation and judgment and imprisonment and all kinds of shit. I have all kinds of mad thoughts. People die in terrible ways in my head. It's like, but those I used to feel were me, and that's who I was. This is who Dave is. Dave is the sum total, but Dave is the sum total of everything he thinks, because Dave is the illusion. Dave is the waves. Those are all waves. But when you discover the ocean, it's like you can have all those thoughts, but they don't tend to have you as much. It doesn't mean you don't feel. You'll feel every single feeling. In fact, you'll probably feel it more because you won't be afraid of feeling. And it's such a beautifully liberating thing. It really is. And it's like you said, Dave, you know, there really is nothing to do. You are already in. Everything we're talking about, everybody already is. There's nothing to do. There's nothing to, you can't add this to yourself. You cannot fix yourself because there's nothing broken to fix. That's why people who've tried to fix themselves have spent years trying to do it to get absolutely nowhere and convinced they're absolutely fucked. And we have people coming and go, how long have you been trying to fix yourself? 20 years. How are you doing with that? Not very well. No, have you ever considered it's because you're not broken? No, I've never considered it's because I'm not broken.
But it does come back to that I am, doesn't it? I am, and then whatever you say after that, with belief, that's what you'll say, that's what you're getting, and that's your experience. So if I believe I have mad thoughts and I get mad thoughts all the time, I'll have mad thoughts. If I believe I don't, truly believe I don't, or I truly believe that they're not mad thoughts. See, that's the thing. If I believe they're mad thoughts, I could have the same thoughts as you, but I don't think they're mad.
Absolutely.
I don't.
Absolutely.
It is nuts, and it can all change very quickly, a number of times. So as I mentioned, we're writing a book at the moment. One of the lads has shared 3 or 4 blogs that he'd written. One of which was about one of the contacts he was in Afghanistan, where he was absolutely petrified. And it was, apart from the noise of everything coming at him, he couldn't hear anybody else. He thought everybody else had been killed and he was the only one left. And that petrified him. And but in a matter of seconds, he went through complete fear of the fact that the end of his life was coming to, well, if I don't do anything, that's probably going to happen. So let's just try and do something. That's going to be my route out of here. And that gave him the courage to lift his head up, to try and work out where the problem was, to try and do something about it. But in doing so, his field of vision opened up and he could see his friends and the fact that they were there and they were doing stuff about it too. But he went from, I am going to die, to I need to do something, to I've got to do this for my friends and now I'm not a part of the picture. And then he lost all fear because it was about helping his mates out of the problem. And when his ego wasn't involved in the, it's not about me anymore, and my survival is about my mate's survival.
But it's even quicker than that.
But it was I've said it a lot.
You change your belief, it changes
completely
all the time.
Completely.
It's like the Japanese soldiers that were found on the island that thought that they were in the war for 20. They thought the war carried on for 20 years. So every single day of their life, they were in fear and conflict.
Yeah.
And then when they found out that the war ended 20 years ago, but they didn't know, so they were still living it. Because they believed that they were still at war.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you were telling us about your friend with the dog. Oh,
This one.
Yeah, he thought it was being.
Oh yeah. I knew of this chap 20 plus years ago when I first arrived in my platoon. He would have been in my platoon, but he was absent without leave. He'd run away, and when I met him 7 weeks ago, he thought he was still absent without leave. He probably was. But he had lived in fear of being caught for that period of time. He'd been doing cash in hand jobs around the world, trying to avoid appearing on any systems so that he couldn't get caught. I made one phone call, found out that he was discharged in 2001. So he'd been running from something that wasn't real.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
absolutely. Now, if he had been still absent without leave, we could have fixed that quite quickly. Probably would have got a couple of days of pay after the process, which would have been quite handy. But anyway, that's by the by. But it took a whole load of things that he thought were true about his life. I put them straight in the waste paper basket and went, oh, well, that's okay. That makes life a bit easier.
Yeah, because he changed his beliefs straight away. Yeah, because he thought it was true. That now he was absent, now he's not.
Yeah.
So everything changed.
Yeah. His whole reality.
His whole reality shifted.
But you see the power of belief right there. That poor man, God bless him, like living in such fear for all those how many years? 20
odd years, yeah.
20 odd years. Just with the belief of something that wasn't actually true. And I mean, even if it is true, it doesn't mean that it's coming about in a different way. It's still coming about in the same way. There is only thought now. This is the only time that thought exists. Thought doesn't exist in time. Time exists in thought. And it's like, it's like when you see that, it's like you start to understand the nature of time. Sorry, mate, I've completely forgotten where I was going.
I was going to say, we said if anyone had questions.
Yeah, good
we
point,
started
good
10
point.
minutes late, so we can
Yeah.
go over, but if anyone has questions, no.
You're right.
Yeah, but it's, forget it, carry on. Right, yeah, let's go back to questions. Sorry, everybody. I completely
It's
lost my
been really
train of thought.
nice, but it's like we might have questions.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Or any insights or anything that they want to share. I think Kelly's parted.
He's got a question.
Mm.
I got a thing to put into this.
Just sit. Come on, sit.
No, it's just about pain and how our minds get used to pain and how it was a case of having a really bad knee and having it seen to and being in pain most of the time with it, and then I couldn't get into my driveway because somebody put a load of bollards across it and traffic lights. And so I was in such a bad mood because I couldn't turn into the road that I got out of the car, moved the traffic lights further out into the middle of the road, got back in my car and drove to my house, opened the car door, got out the car and thought, where's my pain gone? It's disappeared. When I wasn't thinking about it, it wasn't there. I think we get used to thinking about pain, and because we expect it, it turns up. So it isn't just a mental thing, it can be a total physical thing.
Absolutely.
What you expect, you get.
Yeah, and once I realised that my knee probably wasn't that bad, we climbed to the top of Benmore on Mull, which is the Munro. So there you go.
It's the last Munro, isn't it, on the Munro baggers?
Yeah,
Munros.
there's a couple of Benmores. There's one further up as well.
Well, the one on Mull, you set off from sea level, don't you? You dip your feet in the sea, and then you go up
Yeah,
and come back down, dip your feet in the sea level again.
yeah,
Like I said, the only flat bit is the road you cross to start the climb.
Yeah,
100 yards of flat. So yeah, it's interesting.
I remember you
Understand
saying
that.
about that, Mum.
The knees weren't very good after that.
No.
I've been all right since.
Just the biggest belief is that everyone thinks are separate. That's why we need soldiers and armies and stuff like that.
We were saying that
Yeah.
today. Exactly what I was saying today. You know, there is a way out of the nonsense that we're living in this world, and it is through understanding the nature of mind. That's it. You know, when you start to understand yourself, you start to understand everybody else, and that's such a beautiful thing. I mean, I can still end up in heated conversations with people sometimes, but I enter into them so much less than I ever did. And that's just through simply seeing that the nature of reality. You know, I was saying this to a friend the other day. When I used to go out, I used to get into a fight or an argument every single night, guaranteed, at the bar or anywhere. I haven't got into a single argument or scuff in a pub since 2013. And it's like, it was all of a sudden, it was like the people stopped being there. The people who, after I changed, it was like the whole world changed. My world changed. I went from a hostile world to a world full of, there are some amazing people on this planet doing some beautiful things. That was the thing that I became really aware of. The only thing that changed was my mind. That was it. And then I stopped getting into conflict. I stopped getting into bumping into dickheads and arseholes. It's funny that, wasn't it? It's funny, that. We don't realize just how powerful we are. We do not realize. It's like Mel, while sat there with a Lal Babi, like that being that you hold in your arms is like the infinite force of nature. Contained within that tiny baby is all the knowledge to live a life. All the knowledge to live a life, already there. She'll draw it forth and she'll use it as and when she needs it. Just like we do now. We never lose that. How will I cope? How will I cope? How will I cope when? How will I cope with? All these thoughts that run through our heads. We had a lady come to us and she said, I'm so afraid that when I get old, how old is she? 35. When I get old, there'll be nobody there to look after me. What am I going to do when I get old? How old are you? I think she's 35, isn't she? Around that age.
It was good because it was a different conversation from what am I going to do if I put on weight. She says, and then she had a big insight about what will I do when I get old, like who's going to look after me, and that fell off her mind. And everyone's like, oh, that's amazing. She went, and now I'm worrying about it. She'd like create something else that she's worrying about.
Yeah, that
But
was.
she did it with humour, didn't she? Like you
Yeah.
could see how she just kept replacing the thing to worry about.
That was what I lost my train of thought on before. Is like, even if it is real, we talk about this stuff. Even if something is going to happen, you never know what's going to happen in the future. You can never categorically say absolutely. But say something is fairly obvious, it's most likely going to happen. And you sit there and you think about it and you worry about it now and you worry about it now and you worry about it now. You can never account for your experience of that very moment. You can never account for it now because you can never know in the future how you are going to show up given the whatever you're going into. You'll never be able to account for the moment that you are actually there and what you are going to draw forth from thought in that moment as your experience. You can never account for that. So you can never know what the future is going to be like. I spent so much of my life, this is what I lost my train of thought before. I spent so much of my life worrying about the future. Catastrophizing and drawing up mental images and becoming afraid of my own mental images that I drew up. But really, I didn't actually have a clue. I was just scaring myself with thought.
How much thought you did about, we were going to go to Costa Rica for your birthday, and you almost said you weren't going to go because who was going to look after Rusty and how would Rusty cope, and you worried about it, you thought about it for weeks, and then my mum and dad said they'd have him, so we felt a bit more relaxed, but we still worried about it, we talked about it, and then lockdown happened and we didn't get to go to Costa Rica.
No.
But you spent so much time worrying about Rusty and how he was going to cope, and then you're like, oh, we're not going.
And that
So you created this lockdown.
I totally created this one. That kid who, God bless him, who was so afraid of his GCSEs, wasn't he? So stressed out with his GCSEs. And we said, you don't even know your GCSEs are going to actually go ahead.
there might be something happens and you don't even get to sit your
That was
GCSEs.
COVID 2019.
That was October 2019. Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that. But it's the same. The same is also true of your past experiences. So if things have happened in the past and you think it's going to happen the same way again, that's probably what you're going to relive. But it doesn't mean to say that it's going to run the same way ever. It's just that's how it was then. How we experience things in this moment is all that ever happens, and it can be entirely different from what we think might happen, what has happened to us when we've been through something similar in the past. It can all be different, and that's that change you were talking about. Just because for the last 25 times this has happened, okay, it's an indicator that might be the same again, but absolutely it might not. Something more exciting might happen, something completely different might happen. Being open to the possibility that is something that could happen is where we have the magic to play and have fun with the world, which is great because it's a playground.
But even the past isn't fixed.
No,
Because whatever mood you're in when you think about the past,
Yeah,
it can
yeah.
either be good or bad.
completely.
Yeah,
Completely.
It's all made up.
Yeah.
But we think the past, and then they keep replaying that past as if it's real. And if you change the way you think about the past will change,
Yeah,
and
completely.
it'll change your future.
Oh, John, question here, mate. Dave, sorry. Because you've written John. Leela, did you mean John? Because John is actually in the room, but that's my dad. And he works for Indigo and he fits blinds and he works from Kirkland. Dave, right. Dave.
Yeah.
Explain yourself. Who are you and what do you do?
Who am I and what do I do? I was a soldier for 17 years. I stopped doing that 8 years ago, and I've been concentrating on trying to be a human being since then. I live in Scotland and work in Scotland. I do a mixture of 3 principles-based work, some of it paid, working with corporate clients and organisations, and some of it pro bono, working with veterans, the majority of whom are struggling with post-traumatic stress. And I've just started doing a programme with my old regiment, the Rifles, where we're trying to create a network of riflemen across the country that are prepared and feel comfortable and enabled to support their friends that are in need locally. So that's what I'm doing in the world, and I'm trying to have as much fun as I can with that, even though it means speaking to lots of people that are really, really struggling, but knowing that they're okay. That's what I've got to offer them, is turning up, not judging them on what it is that is running through their mind, knowing that the content of that isn't necessarily helpful to solving their problem, because actually their problem is a lack of connection with who they are. So hopefully that helps. And I can't say that's too far.
Yeah. Great. I have 2 ex-military friends who have PTSD. How can they contact? Good question.
That's a good
How
question.
can you be contacted?
Cool. Dave at simplicityin.mind.co.uk is the best way to get hold of me. We can type Simplicity in Mind. Yeah, that's how they can get in touch with me. And what I've noticed.
.co.uk.
.co.uk, yeah. What I've noticed is quite a lot of where we get stuck collectively as human beings is the language that's used around things. So I've stopped talking about PTSD because the D makes it sound like there's a disorder, that we've caught something, which is never true. We don't catch something. It's just post-traumatic stress is a great way of describing a set of symptoms at a point in time. It doesn't describe the individual ever. But the way we put language around things can create some of the problems. So by telling people that they have a disorder means that they're now a victim of something that they need to be cured from, rather than they're just experiencing a set of symptoms right now that look like this. And that helps the individual understand where they are right now, and any clinician that's helping them to try and think about how they might be able to assist. So I've stopped thinking about things as disorders for that very reason. Bill Pettit is a wonderful psychiatrist,
or former psychiatrist who thinks that actually, as human beings, there is only one mental problem, and that's chronic mental stress. And that tends to screw us up in various different ways and shows us a number of different symptoms that people can experience. And over the years, people have put those in buckets and called them things, when actually we're just struggling with stress and it's having a physiological effect on us.
And stress, what is stress? Well, stress is thought. Again, we're back to thought.
That's great news.
No, you're absolutely right. You're not disordered. And you know, the mind doesn't disorder. And this is quite a controversial statement, I know, but the mind doesn't actually disorder. The mind creates. You know, and it's like, as we think, and bearing in mind, when I'm talking about thought, we tend to think of the intellect. We tend to think of thought as being thoughts that I am consciously thinking. I'm talking bigger. I'm talking bigger than that. When I'm talking about thought, I'm talking about an energy that, you know, I'm holding my hands like that. I didn't consciously think to hold my hands like this, but there was a thought there, obviously, to do so. When I jump in my vehicle, I don't consciously think about holding the steering wheel and clutch and change. If friggin' hell, took your thought off the road, you know, and I just jump in the car and talking to you on the way down, you know, and believe it or not, we safely negotiate our vehicle to here, and, you know, thought drove the vehicle, but it wasn't conscious thought. You know, when I'm talking about thought, I'm talking about something bigger than what our intellect can actually comprehend. This is God force. And it's like, again, I've completely lost my train of thought again. Where was I going to? Oh yeah. It doesn't make mistakes, doesn't the mind? It makes judgments. It creates judgments which then appear as mistakes as a reality to the individual who dreamt up the judgment. And it's like the mind does not disorder. The mind is not in the spectrum of anything that could possibly be disordered, simply because all it does is create. And as it creates via thought. And as we think, so it is done unto us. So as we believe, so it is done unto us continuously. There is no disorder in that. It is working absolutely beautifully. When I was diagnosed with depression and all this stuff and anxiety and all this stuff, I wasn't disordered. I was thinking really shit thoughts. And as I was thinking really shit thoughts, I was feeling really, really shit. I used to wake up in the morning, and for a moment I'd wake up and go, at this point in my life, I go, oh. I'd look around and go, why am I here? This isn't where I live. Oh, shit. I'm in this situation. And it was only when thought came about the situation that I was having judgment about, that this was a wrong situation, that I started to enter back into what I was diagnosed with as depression. That wasn't a broken system. As I thought, so I felt and experienced. That is not, the mind does not disorder. We know very, very little about mind, by the way. We know so little about mind. What we're talking about is only just scratching the surface, but the mind does not disorder. This is an old school theory, and it's based on the idea of brain, most of it. We're not talking about brain. You don't need to talk about brain. You don't need to talk about brain. The brain will look after itself. The brain looks after itself. I had a friend once who said, I'm struggling with the neurological pathways in my brain. I've done this, and now I've got to figure out how to change his neurological pathways. God bless this man. He was frigging mental. And I said, how are you going to do that then? I don't know. I know that I lived the most well-worn neurological pathways of anger and judgment and disdain towards people, humanity. But in one shift of consciousness, those well-worn pathways ceased. In one shift in mind, those pathways, I no longer walk them like I did. You know, the brain is a ball of fat, it's a ball of matter. Matter cannot affect, matter cannot change, create more matter. Where have we gone?
It might still be there. It just might have been
Oh,
deleted. Yeah.
Click on Zoom again.
We have to go.
More questions.
It's still there. It's just
Yeah.
We'll close it up and say, oh, we're back, we're back. Well, for just, I'll just finish off this statement, then we'll call it a night and we'll thank Dave. But we tend to often spend a lot of time looking at the physical, at the brain, and the way I see it is matter cannot create matter. Matter can only ever be created from energy. This is a fundamental law. You know, I can smash this cup on the floor, there will only still be the same amount of cup, even if it covers a greater surface area. There's still the same amount of cup. It doesn't create more matter. The only thing that can create matter is the energy that created the clay to make the cup. And so when we've looked at the neurology of things, we've looked at the neurological pathways and we've gone, well, that's the reason why. But we don't ask the question, why are these neurological pathways being created? And then people have gone, well, that neurological pathway was created when such and such happened. It must be that circumstance. Love you both.
See you later.
See you later. Take care going home. Thanks so much.
See you later.
Thanks for coming, you two. It must be that circumstance that created that neurological pathway. But if that was the case, would it not be the case that everybody would have the same neurological pathway given the circumstance that took place? Like yourself and your lads in war, you know, something happens. Would it not be that the brain would all be like created in the same way because you're all observing the same circumstance? But what I'm interested in is, what is it that tells the neurological pathway to be created? What is it that tells the brain to fire a neuron? What's the force? What's the energy? What's the energy behind it? You know, because that is where we must look if we want to start to understand neurology, if we want to truly start to understand mental health. We must start to look at what creates, what creates, what creates, what creates, what is it that changes? It won't take long before people boil it back, boil it back, boil it back, boil it back, and they discover, well, it's consciousness. It's this inexplicable thing that people cannot locate within the body. They can't pin it down. They can't find it with a microscope. It's the thing that lives. It's the difference between a living body and a dead body. It's that magical living part, the magical inexplicable part that is you. And it's like, as we start to align with that and start to come away, draw away from the body is only doing what the mind is saying. That's why people have spontaneous healing remissions, and that's why the placebo is the most effective drug on the planet. Inconveniently. But it's like, people are not disordered. People are not disordered. Nobody's disordered. Dave, I want to thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you, Dave.
Thanks for having me.
Really
I really
It's
do.
been fun.
It's been awesome spending the day with you.
It's been
And
fun
it's
having
been
fun.
great having you here. I just wish if we could have had more people, it would have been excellent, but there's been the people who are meant to be here, so that's nice.
That's cool.
But
Thank
Dave,
you.
thank you so much. Has anybody got anything they want to say? Why so many psychiatry drugs? Is it because we are scared to feel the hard bits as well as the easy bits? Yeah, we're afraid of feelings. Ultimately, that's why people take drugs, psychological drugs, is because they're afraid of feelings. They don't like, they think the feeling is an illness. If you imagine a rainbow, you would never look at a rainbow and go, nah, there's some wrong colours in that rainbow. Nah, orange, purple and blue. No, they should not be in that rainbow. We embrace the rainbow because it's beautiful in its totality. You are beautiful in your totality with all your ability, with your ability to experience every single feeling within the spectrum of emotion and feeling that we get to experience. There is no such thing as a wrong feeling. There is no such thing as a wrong thought. There is no such thing as a broken rainbow. Afraid of feelings. Are we under too much influence by medicals? Yes, I personally think that would be quite accurate.
But all of that, all of that thought from, in way that medicine's created and does things is trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
So it's all the same, all of that is coming from the same place. So it's all helpful to a certain degree. It's just not joining all the dots. And so if we see that everything is right and correct given the right circumstances, then yes, it's absolutely right. But things can be misguided or get a little bit misunderstood, and that's it. And that side of it's innocent. And if we can see that, well, then it's not the wrong thing. It's just not quite as right as it could be.
There's room for change.
Yeah, there's room to learn and grow.
For improvement.
So if we think about all of medical science, it's constantly evolving and getting better, which is amazing. So that's cool. So for where we are at the moment, it's doing everything it thinks it needs to until it sees something different. And that's where this conversation's starting to take shape, which is great.
Beautiful. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Ange, did you want to stay on, love?
That's Ali.
Ali, was it Ali? It was Ali, was it?
Ali needs to talk to you at 9 o'clock.
Oh, it's Ali,
5
right.
minutes ago.
Oh, right. Sorry, I thought it was Ange.
No,
Oh, sorry, Ange is on, right, sorry. Right, everyone, we're going to call it a night. And thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you all.
He's been Dave Hill. Thank you very much. And Dave's contact details are on the talk here. I'm just going to read it out.
So I'm going to put a link on the Freedom Thinking WhatsApp group and Facebook page.
Cool.
Thank you.
Dave at Simplicity in Mind.
In mind.
Inmind.co.uk.
That will disappear when we log off.
Yeah. Cool, everyone. Loads of love. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Loads of love.
Bye.
Bye. I love this at the end of it. Stop recording. See you, Naughty.